Trump had a $916 million loss in 1995. But that's like normal. If you lose money in something, you get to write it. I mean, you get to deduct it. I mean, that makes sense. Like,
well, yeah.
It would suck if you didn't. Like, why does that make you avoid? Like, why is it a bad thing that so you lose money and then you get to, as you make income, you get to charge it against your losses, so that like that happens all the time. That's not a weird or bad thing.
Oh yeah.
Sucks when you lose money. You get to credit that. I mean, you get some compensation for having lost money. It'd be really unfair if every time you made a venture and lost money, you didn't get a tax benefit, but when you lost money and when you made money, you only had to pay taxes. That'd be terrible. I mean, if you make, for argument's sake, you lose $1 million, then you make $1 million, you shouldn't have a tax due because you didn't make anything. There's no income. It just shows how out of touch I think Hillary is. Because it's like, why should he pay taxes? I mean,
I don't think Hillary is out of touch. I think she's just pandering to an out of touch audience.
No, yeah, that makes sense. But like, if you make 10 and then lose 5, you should pay taxes on the 5. If you lose 10 and then make 5, you still don't owe any taxes because you're still down 5. Makes sense. Like, it's not,
Yeah, that'd be taking you when you're down.
Yeah, it'd be terrible if the system was any different. So she's like, he lost $1 billion and that made him avoid $1 billion of income tax. Like, yeah, that's okay. There's a lot of reasons to not like Trump, but I'm not sure that's one of them.
But considering that
and the fact the guy lost,
target audience doesn't pay federal income tax.
Yeah,
definitely.
No, that's fair. But the fact the guy lost $1 billion in 1995, I'm just kind of in awe of that. Like, I've had some big losses. That's a lot.
I wish I had $1 billion to lose.
Right?
In 1995.
Yeah, 20 years ago, he lost $1 billion. That's, yeah, he's a very up and down, but so are a lot of people, and I think she really has to avoid, she knows what's good for her, she'll avoid hitting his business record, because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
How much is that $1 billion worth in today's dollars, though?
Right? No, yeah, exactly. It's probably, I guess I could go to Excel.
Right?
It's probably about double. Let's see. It's 2% for 20 years, right? No, 50% more, so $1.5 billion.
Yeah. According to an inflation calculator, it's 1.6.
Yeah, I lost, when I got arrested, I probably lost like 200, something like that, so it was not small, but not $1 billion either. It's all relative, it's funny, I always talk about these illnesses, and I'm always looking at diseases that are severe, but if you've ever had even a modest illness like asthma, if you had an asthma attack, you think your world is ending, like it sucks, That's just because they're lethal illnesses doesn't mean asthma is, it's a walk in the park, like, it sucks, It's all, relative to your worldview, I guess. And,
Did you see Patton Oswalt's tweet?
No.
Whoever sent Trump's tax returns.
What'd he say?
Whoever sent Trump's tax returns to the New York Times sent them from Trump Tower. Oh, wow. Looks like Trump's playing 4D chess again.
Huh.
John Miller strikes again.
Huh. John Miller.
I watched your speech at Harvard where you briefly discussed your plan to curb drug prices.
I don't think there is a drug price problem.
Or excuse me, you mentioned during your speech at Harvard that there was a simple fix for some sort of healthcare issues in the U.S., and that was by the federal government creating a drug company.
Yeah, I think to the extent that we want lower priced drugs, which has its own ramifications that are important to understand, but take it as a given that we want much lower priced drugs, the government could set up a drug company to make low-priced generic drugs. And one of the problems that people don't seem to have a problem with, say, Pfizer inventing a new cancer medicine, and that cancer medicine costing $90,000 because, they invented it and they took a lot of risks and it's not so bad, right? But people think that, say, a company like mine or like Mylan, when they raised the price of EpiPen and they didn't invent it, and they're sort of opportunistic that there's something wrong with that, well, that's fine. And if we all agreed that we don't want those kinds of things to happen, we could simply set up a drug company, it would not take very long, that sold those specific off-patent drugs and made a steady supply of those drugs at a fixed price forever. And it would sort of destroy the generics industry, but at the same time, it would provide this service like a utility, for instance, or any other regulated sort of good. If we believe that certain drugs are as important as water or electricity or anything like that, then maybe we should act like it and actually do something like this. So, and then...
Do you think there's actual feasibility that Congress would implement this?
I think so. It's the only solution that makes any sense. Basically, it would deprive any vulture-like company from being opportunistic. It would create American jobs. It would be an asset for the American people, just like Chinese and Russians have state-owned enterprises. We would have a state-owned enterprise, and it would not be unusual for us because we have GSEs or GSOs that are basically the equivalent of SEOs. So it wouldn't be the first time we did it. We did it with mortgages. We sort of felt that mortgages should be somewhat regulated by the government and somewhat free market, and that's sort of why Fannie Mae exists. So it's really not that wild of a solution at all. And
do you know of any organizations currently lobbying for this, or do you intend on doing anything to spearhead this?
Yeah, I mean, I can pick up the phone and call my friends in the White House. So, it's not hard for me to do that.
Really?
That's why they
like MTA was like a private company, no?
It's not. No, it's state owned. It's just I think that's why they've raised prices so aggressively. That or they're learning from your boy. How about your boy raise your prices real quick? You got a product and they need it, raise that price.
Seriously though, I mean, if you don't want to pay, you're out of luck.
Yeah, walk, son. Walk.
That's it.
Walk. Hope you like walking though. $3 or walking. You're walking. That's what I would say to people who Mr. Mayor, Mayor Shkreli, the recent price increases to MTA have caused quite a stir amongst New Yorkers who are worried that their commute will be more expensive. Better learn to walk, though. Hope you like walking. This price is going even higher. What up? You don't like the subway? I ain't make you take the subway.
How much does it cost to get there on the subway for one trip?
$3. We've just been saying it was $1.25 when I was a kid. You used to be able to pay with tokens. Now you got this Metro card. By the way,
pre-Metro card.
Metro card is a carry trade.
No, wait, it costs $1 to just refill the card, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's like it's a float business. They hold your cash while you're not spending it, and if you can invest that money. Meanwhile,
when did tokens go out of fashion in New York?
Circulation, dog, not fashion. About 10, 15 years ago. I used to have bus passes too. Yeah, it's not cheap stuff, but if you can find the $4 million from other people, then you're taking no risk. And you gotta,
That's true.
Then you gotta pitch if you're public, you're telling the world that, okay, well, this should work. You might get a valuation of $50 million, then you sell another $10 million. So then you have $10 million just in case to do your second drug, and you hope that one of them works. So you get a little portfolio going. So you can do it. It's not impossible. A lot of investors will want to see your first card turn over before letting you play 3 or 4 cards at once. But I was lucky that I got enough money to play 3 or 4 cards at once. And predictably, the first card isn't really, usually your first idea isn't your best one. It's rare at least that is the case. Sometimes it is. For me, I'd say my second idea was a hit. Third idea for that, this is just for 𝗏𝗏, was a hit, or at least sort of a semi-hit, if you will, sort of like where 𝗏𝗏 is now. But the first one was a disaster. If I was just judging the first one, it would have not worked out. We didn't spend too much on that, maybe $1 million. Yeah, no, most entrepreneurs are left with, at best 10%, usually far less. Sometimes they're just get a couple percent. I was lucky I got to keep about 20, 25% of 𝗏𝗏, more of Turing. But most entrepreneurs do not get to keep much because they usually don't have any cash. They gotta raise money from outside folks.
That can be a problem, can it? Because they want
They
to run the business.
Yeah, exactly. The second they don't like the way you look, there's a new CEO. Because they own 80%, so you're really working for them, and they're a really tough kind of place to be. You still have your board of directors. They can decide. I mean, my guy convinced the board of directors to fire me. It was crazy.
Jeez.
It's nuts.
It's crazy.
They just wanted my job. That's all you need to do is put it to a vote. And right now, if you could do that, Donald Trump would probably be fired. Say, okay, let's switch it up to somebody else.
Hey man, so where's the best place to go to learn all this stuff?
To learn all this
Obviously,
stuff?
the smart
Martin's
obviously
site.
the smart ass answer is school.
I'll give you no. It's not school. It's working for a great investor. School won't teach you how to invest. I mean, when someone says they're a good investor to me, I ask them how much money have they made. And if the answer is less than $100 million, I say, and it's not just how much money they make for themselves. It's also their returns and how much of it was fee-based versus performance-based.
Martin, who'd you learn from?
It's hard. You got to learn by word of mouth. I had an old boss named Steve, who was investing genius. He worked at Tiger. You piece together things from people. One of my first investors is a billionaire who I learned a lot from. It's hard, you know. It's a word of mouth thing. It's being a student of the game. You know, professors have never invested $1. You know, what can they? I did have a finance professor at Baruch who worked at Bankers Trust. Bankers Trust was a very successful, well-known investment bank that did proprietary trading, and he was an economist at Bankers Trust. So, occasionally you'll get a professor who has real-world experience. So, you can learn from someone who's practical application, but you cannot teach investing without actually having done it and proven you're good at it. Because anyone can say they're good at investing, but investing is something you do. You actually have to do it. You know.
I've mainly just been in the trading realm, the charting and stuff, and I think there's really no reason not to learn the fundamental side too. I mean, I see all these traders and I wonder, like, you don't hear many guys talking financials. It's like, if you can blend the two, it's a lot more powerful.
My opinion that looking at lines is kind of nonsense.
Yo, Martin,
we gotta keep.
You remember your professors at Baruch?
I don't remember them by name. A few of them.
Did you ever have an Indian guy?
Yeah.
A very disrespectful guy.
I don't remember.
I was wondering what you attributed the rising cost of an EpiPen to. It's gone up over like 400% over the past few years.
Crazy thing called supply and demand. You might have heard of.
Well, no, I understand that, but with more people, aware of anaphylactic shock and having more allergies, wouldn't they sell more? And by selling more, being able to keep the price without that much of an increase?
There's a funny thing in pharma that I think a lot of people don't understand, that you can't just up and make a drug in 3 days. So if you could do that, you're right that if someone raised the price of a drug, they would be knocked down quickly. But this isn't PlayStations or pens. You can't, or it's not Walmart. You can't react to. You got to get plants set up. You got to get manufacturing. You got to get FDA approval. So you raise a price. Competitors are not so fast to act. So when a competitor drops out of the market, which happens a lot in drugs because there's mergers, there's companies that, quite frankly, they often decide it's not worth making a drug at a low cost. A lot of companies stop making drugs like 𝗟𝗏 because there's not enough money in them. So what happens is drug companies decide to raise prices to a level where they can profit. So just because something goes up 400% doesn't mean that company is making a fortune all of a sudden. You have no idea if they were making money or losing money before that.
Sure. And it seems like, and you would obviously know more than me, but it seems like they're the only game in town when it comes to that. I know a couple of people who carry them, and it's always the same brand.
Yeah.
Like, what is it, AccuCheck or something like that?
Yeah, there's only a couple of manufacturers. Pens are harder to make than pills.
Okay.
It's just one of these things where,
it's a good business if you can jump into it, but the FDA is very sensitive, especially when it's a life-saving medicine. They don't want to just make copies if they're not sure that the copies are the real thing. And if you're used to an EpiPen that works the way where you take off the plunger, then you stick it in, then you press it in, and all of a sudden you get an EpiPen that doesn't work that way, well, you could be putting people's lives at stake, because you only have a matter of seconds, sometimes.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say, sometimes you only have a matter of seconds, and the FDA wants to make sure that the pens pretty much all work the same way. Then if you have a patent on the pen, then all of a sudden you get, delayed competition because of that. So pharma markets are very, very inefficient and very strange. That's why, quite frankly, as a business person, I kind of like them. But I think more important than that, what you do with the money is really important. You have a responsibility, in my opinion, when you make a lot of money in selling a drug. You have a lot of responsibility that you're going to take that money and do something smart with it. And I do that, I think, better than most companies. So, in any event.
That's great. Hey, out of curiosity.
Yeah.
Do monopoly laws apply to certain medications where a manufacturer, so let's just say a diabetes pill or whatever, and there's only currently just one manufacturer making it? Do monopoly laws go into effect with that, where they have to try to have a different vendor because of that?
So there's
two companies making it?
So the monopoly laws that I know, the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act, don't say anything about, there needs to be more than one maker of a good. If you want to make Gatorade,
I guess cornering the market,
it's not cornering if you're the only maker of the good. It's just
that's true. That's true.
It's as long as you're not stopping competition, there's no patent on epinephrine. It's a naturally.
No, that makes sense.
Anyone can make an EpiPen. It's just a matter of nobody wants to because it's not a big business, and it was never a big business. Now that the price is up, it's a much bigger business. But it doesn't mean it was this amazing business before, and that this company is being predatory. It just means that they found a price where they can compete at that they like, and if someone wants to make an EpiPen, they can go ahead. Monopoly applies to trying to stop your competition, and that's why we have something called the Federal Trade Commission that is very aggressive and enforces any anti-competitive behavior, which is maybe the word you're looking for.
I don't think there's a disproportionate number of men who are intrinsically attracted to the scientific and a disproportionately large number of women who are intrinsically unattracted to it. I think it is a social influence.
I think a lot of it is parenting.
Look for a good example at one of the most sensitive subjects is the difference in earnings between race, say, for instance, amongst the lowest earners, African Americans, and amongst the highest earners, Asian Americans. I believe that almost the entire difference can be chalked up to cultural values, as sadly as it is to explain it. Again, it's my theory. It's based on somewhat empirical evidence and somewhat common observation, but I think that the family unit is extremely important in Asian culture, and it's so much so that there's this willful division of labor, and there's also this huge importance placed on education and achievement. You don't see the same amount of focus in definitely not in African American communities, and certainly not even in white communities anymore. So it's just one of these things that I think is to deny that culture plays a huge role in choices is really absurd. Obviously any individual solution can be explained, and there's plenty of female mathematicians and plenty of male film directors or whatever, but theater majors. But the reality is that we have these things in front of us, and I think we have to mostly study them instead of being angry about them or screaming about them or whatever. And that's the real problem with, I think, the way society looks at it is it's necessarily a problem or it's necessarily a bad thing. And it's not always. I'm not sure it's a bad thing, if we can study it and explain it and really kind of think about it. Maybe women, because of some biochemical estrogen-like reason or some reason that they can have children and men can't, that all of a sudden this ties it all together and there's a really good hypothesis for why STEM doesn't have women. Or maybe it's actually a systemic bias that should be talked about and studied and maybe even started to be eliminated. I don't know what the answer is, but certainly a lack of it's as useful as trying to cure cancer by talking about it, right? You have to study it and you have to do serious, rigorous research. You could say, oh, well, I think cancer is because we eat bad food. Well, that opinion and 250 gets you a train ride in New York City. It's very not valuable to have the discourse without, unfortunately very boring and painful analytics, and we're so tempted to talk about it because we see it around us, right? Our brothers, fathers, sisters, mothers, and you can't help but opine on it. But the reality is it's actually intricate science, and we do it all disservice, I think, by just sort of saying, oh, well, this is that and that is this, and don't you know that this is this? And it's really kind of, absurd to me, especially because, I don't understand a lot of it. I'd like to, but only so many hours in a day. Has anyone here actually studied, been a sociology or anthropology major?
I had to take an anthro class and then
I think we've all taken
gender studies class.
Yeah, I think we've all taken a class. I mean,
it actually is.
Wasn't a
No, I know.
sociology major, but I've taken probably 6 or 7 social classes.
Well, that's close.
Well, I mean, as far as it was relevant to this, as far as a holistic view and kind of the interaction between biology and cultures.
Right.